So I want to start with just addressing a bit of a misconception that I think is starting to build up around the Open Food Network. A lot of people see the Open Food Network as a bit of software that connects farmers and growers with eaters and buyers. And sure enough, that is what it is. But primarily, Open Food Network is a group of people. It's that worldwide network of food activists who believe that the food system is broken and who want to work together collaboratively to build a toolkit and a set of resources and a human endeavor that will collectively address the brokenness of the food system and help us to rebuild from the bottom up new food systems for the world. And one of the tools that that amazing group of people are developing is a piece of open source software, and that is what a lot of people see. And what I'm hoping we can do in this next hour and a half is give you a glimpse of some of those people, some of those amazing people who collectively are coming together to address the challenges of the food system. It's not at all an exclusive group. Because you are here, you are interested in what we're doing, and we openly and very warmly invite you to be part of this network. We want to build this network of farmers, growers, community food enterprises, market managers, shop managers, people running food banks, people running food hubs, people running food co-ops, buying groups, because we believe that together we will build better food systems, and by working collectively we will have significantly more influence and significantly more effect than if we work separately. So before I start, I want to just address one of the key factors for me about the Open Food Network. So Open Food Network has been collectively running for about 8 or 9 years. Over that time, people in countries all around the world, we're going to meet a few of them today, but currently 20 countries with another 15 countries in the process of joining the network, work collectively to bring together their ideas of what tools do we need in order to build a better food system. I'm getting a message saying my internet's unstable. Am I still clear? People still hear me okay? Yeah, thanks, Davey. Those people come together, they bring their ideas of what tools they need to rebuild a better food system, and then some of them bring a bit of money, some of them bring resources, some of them bring their time, and collectively we are building this toolkit. One of the most important things about that toolkit for me is that it's open source. So many of the, let me address the topic of this session today, commons off the land. One of the most important things about this software for me is that it's open source. Nobody owns that software, or more accurately, everybody owns that software. So all of the users, the farmers, the growers, the community food enterprises, the people who are using that software are the people who decide the future of it. They decide in their individual country how much people pay in order to be part of that network. They decide how it will evolve in the future. And nobody can sell this toolkit that we're creating. It is not for sale. It is a commonwealth. It is owned collectively by the people who are building it and the people who are constantly updating it and improving it. The Open Food Network has a new deployment of the software, a new release of the software, sorry, wrong word, a new release of the software every week on a Tuesday. A new improvement, another layer of functionality is added to this network. And what we're trying to do is to build that collectively. We're trying to build it as a commonwealth. Bella, I wonder if you could just stop the share and put me up briefly before we go any further. Thank you. What I'd like to suggest is that in a moment we're going to go into the workshop properly. Let me just finish that bit about open source. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by the technology here. The commonwealth that is the Open Food Network can never be sold. It can never be taken away from the people who use it. And for me, that is core difference between the Open Food Network and many of the other systems, particularly since the pandemic. A lot of people have been solving the food system with a little bit of technology. They've been introducing ways of fixing the food system. My concern about many of them is that they are proprietary. They are owned by somebody who, however good their intentions, at some point, if that technology becomes popular, that could be sold. That could be taken for profit by somebody else and changed and taken away from the people who use it. OFN will never be sold. It cannot be sold. It is open source software. Okay, so before we get into the plan for the workshop, I think most of the people have joined who are going to join now. I want to go back to the point that I made earlier about the fact that OFN is a global organization. I want to go back to the point I made earlier that ORFC is global this year. And some of you are starting to put up in the chat where you're from. It would be great if everybody else could do that. A little bit of detail about, well, just your name. Well, your name comes up anyway, but the country you're in. Because in a moment, you're going to hear from some amazing people around the world who are using the Open Food Network. And I regularly, with my OFN colleagues, have this sense that we are a network that spans the world. We are people around the world with a common interest in the earth that we all sit on, this little spinning ball spinning through space. We are all on that, and we all care deeply about the future of that earth. And so I want to celebrate the fact that that is happening again now, that all of you guys, many of you will be in the UK, but there are people I can see from all over the world who are part of this call now. And what I'd like to do is to settle myself to join me in a brief focus on the earth. This group around the Oxford Real Farming Conference is a care and an interest in the future of the earth, the human beings and the non-human beings that make up this biosphere that we're part of. So what I'm going to suggest is that we take 3 breaths together before we get started, and the first breath will be for Earth, for this planet that we are sitting on, this planet that we are part of, this planet that feeds us, that is our cradle and our grave. It's where we came from, and it's where we'll go back to when we die, and it's our source of food. So we'll do a breath together for the Earth. We'll then do a breath together for the sky, the heavens above us, this infinite space through which we're spinning. And we'll do a third breath together for the waters, for the rain that falls on our lands and nourishes our lands, and the rains and the rivers and the streams that ultimately flow into the seas and the oceans that then connect together all of the countries that we're sitting on. So some of you might want to close your eyes for this. Some of you might find it a little bit weird, but it's just a way of connecting all of the people on this call and all of the speakers who you're about to hear from around the world together to celebrate the connectivity that makes up the Open Food Network. Okay. So our first breath together for the earth beneath our feet. And a second breath together for the skies above our heads. And a third breath together for the rains and the waters and the seas and the oceans around us that connect us together. Thank you all. Bella, could we have the slides back, please? And slide number 2. So the plan for the workshop today, we're going to run through till 2:30 UK time, which is just an hour and a quarter from now. The plan is that we'll talk very briefly about the background and the vision of the Open Food Network. I will do part of that, and my colleague Kirsten, who is a co-founder of the Open Food Network, will add to what I say. We'll then hear a little bit more from Kirsten about OFN in Australia. We'll then hear from Thomas, who is here, part of this panel, from OFN in Brazil, Hector from OFN Guatemala, Davey from OFN Ireland, Rafat from OFN Jordan, Kobe from OFN Nigeria, West Africa, and I will do a quick summary of OFN UK. You'll then be joining breakout rooms, and the breakout rooms will be numbered. So as the panelists go through, if you've got a particular question for one of the panelists, can you change your Zoom name by putting that number in front of your Zoom name? So if you've got a question for Hector in Guatemala, can you change your Zoom name to have the number 3 in front of your name on Zoom, please? And we will then endeavor to get you into the correct breakout room. If you don't put a number, we'll just randomly dump you in a room with other people. And there will be a facilitator in each of those rooms, which will be the panelist. We will then come back together and look at to hear any feedback from the breakout rooms and any plenary discussions. And we will be finishing by 2:30. We'll be finishing prompt at 2:30 UK time. Okay, so next slide shows the Open Food Network as it stands at the moment, which is all of the countries which have deployed the software. As I said earlier, there are another 15 countries in the process of deploying. Particularly since the pandemic, a lot of countries have realized their food systems are even more broken than they thought they were, and they're using the Open Food Network to rebuild their food systems. But you can see here the countries that have currently deployed. Some of you might not know what the Open Food Network is, so before we get into the background, I want to ask Bella to show me the next slide, which shows you what it looks like in the UK at the moment. The tractor symbols you see here are producers, and the shop symbols are shops, people who are selling produce. Some of the shops may be farms or growers, so some producers will be selling direct from their farms, and some of them will be selling, as well as selling direct through them from their farms, or instead of selling direct from their farms, they may be selling through a hub, and the hub might be a farmer's market with an online shop front. It might be a little village shop which has a few producers who also sell online. So maybe a village shop that's selling fresh produce that they don't want to stock on the shelves. They have an online shop front linking up with local producers, and then they have the produce brought into the shop once a week, and it's all been pre-ordered and prepaid for and goes straight out to the shoppers. It might be a food bank distributing surplus food from these farms. It might be a buying group. It might be a food co-op. But the most important thing is that they're all networked with each other, whether it's a producer who is just sitting there waiting for someone to sell their produce, or whether it's a full-scale food hub with 300 producers all selling through that food hub on a single shop front. They will all be networked together, and they will all have the opportunity to cross-sell each other's products and to distribute for each other. And that's what the Open Food Network is good at, is bringing together multiple different enterprises on a single platform. Next slide, please, Bella. So this is what the shopfront would look like. You would see the brand of the local hub, in this case, Peninsula Producers Hub in West Wales. We believe in subsidiarity in the Open Food Network. We have 9 core values. One of them is subsidiarity, by which we mean that the decision should be made at the most local level possible. So we champion each of our individual shop fronts. In this case, Peninsula Food Hubs is the main brand, and the OFN logo is hidden away. And for each shop front, you can see the product, you can see the picture of it. If you clicked on the prawns, you'd be able to see a bit more detail about where the prawns were from. If you clicked on Ocean Seafoods, you would then be able to connect directly with the producer. You could be able to see where they are, what their production methods are. You can connect directly with them. We're very much into transparency. If you were to click on the price, you can see a price breakdown there, and you can actually see how much of that selling price is going to the producer and how much of it is going to be taken by the hub as a markup to cover their selling prices. Okay, that's enough from me. I think I'm going to hand over to Kirsten because I've talked a lot about OFN. I think probably the best person to talk to is about the background of OFN is Kirsten. And I think I'm going to hand over to you, Kirsten. And if I've forgotten stuff, I can always come back in later. But yeah, thanks for your time.
Hello, everyone. Could we go to the next slide, please, Bella? That was very succinct and excellent, Nick, in terms of covering off the main points. So I'm probably going to skip some of these slides because I think you've covered them. The first thing I just wanted to say is, where this came from in Australia, like how this concept of open food network sort of emerged here in Australia was myself and my partner, Serenity, were keen to farm. She comes from a farm up here in northeast Victoria where we are now farming, working on commons on the land as well. But we were pretty clear that we didn't want to farm until we were able to be price setters, not price takers, and that we both had worked in policy and research and food systems and could see that the distribution system was, where a lot of those problems were. In looking at how that could change, we started to understand that the kinds of tools and systems for new food supply networks were and remain, I guess, inadequate, fragmented and expensive. So lots of people spending money on things that never really did what they needed. Lots of people with spreadsheets and pens of paper doing roughly the same thing as the people up the road, but with not much ability to coordinate, and that we could build better infrastructure and better solutions if we do it together. So that was basically what we were coming from. Next slide, please. We did lots of research around the world. I think Nick's covered off these key points. What we thought was needed, what we felt was needed, was something that was open, so enabling this reduction and sharing of costs through collaboration, networked, as Nick has discussed, enabling lots of farmers and partners to work together efficiently and scale through this collaboration, not just through vertical supply chains, but by collaborating across networks. That we wanted transparency in supply networks as an alternative to anonymous bulk commodities. We wanted to support diverse business models. So it's not just if you do it this particular way, you can use this software, but to really try and support that diversity in how people do things, locally responsive, context specific, that local people know how things work in their area, and that non-profit was very important to us. So this avoiding of, I guess, extractive capitalism, whereby a whole lot of effort from a whole lot of people is making money for a smaller number of people, when what we really need is reinvestment and more investment in the food systems that we're trying to change. Next slide, please. We went looking around the world to try and find if what we needed existed, and we couldn't. So that's why we decided to start something. We did start playing around with code, roped in our housemate in 2011 and started experimenting with a little van and, trays of avocados, and seemed to be getting a bit of traction. So in 2012, we set up a non-profit, the Open Food Foundation, explicitly to develop and protect a commons of open source knowledge, code, applications and platforms for fair and sustainable food systems. So that was our aspiration in 2012. I think it was not long after that, maybe even 2012, that someone put us in contact.
Self-assessment payments today.
Someone could mute, please. Someone put us in contact with Nick in the UK, and the global community sort of started to develop. Nick's explained this. This is just you can be visible on the Open Food Network without selling anything. You can sell things through your own shop, and you can collaborate with other people to sell products. That's it. Next slide, please. In Australia, so these are some of the kinds of enterprises that we support on the platform in Australia. So Food Hub's doing retail, Food Hub's doing wholesale, people selling direct from farms. I think it's about a third to a half of our users are actually farmers just using it as their farm shop. We have a few community supported agriculture, consumer driven buying groups, informal producer collaborations, more formal producer collaborations, just sharing logistics and distribution. particularly through COVID. We've had an increase in the number of online farmers markets. We've had an increase in all of these, but particularly the farmers markets, as they were shut down. We had quite a few farmers markets who'd been talking about developing an online offering for years, and COVID was the thing that really, tipped them over the edge. They had to do it, so we got quite a few of them up and running within a couple of weeks. Yeah, that's the map of what's going on. So we've got pretty good coverage across most of the highly habited areas of Australia. Yeah, that little graph at the bottom is just showing, COVID in Australia and globally, Open Food Network went nuts at that first peak, which was when Australia went into lockdown the first time. We had a 14-fold increase in turnover across a couple of weeks, which then, once we came out of lockdown, plummeted. We went into lockdown again, went shooting back up. So we're currently in an interesting place where Australia is mostly not in lockdown, so things are dropping off. So it's a good question for us about, whether we can stabilise. I think we will stabilise it considerably higher than where we were before, but probably not at those peaks. So this is just a bit of a discussion around some of the other things that Open Food Network in Australia do, and I think Open Food Network in a lot of the other more established countries do as well. So we're not just about the software at all. We talk about basically providing tools and resources. So we are part of the team developing the Open Food Network platform. We also do software development and support for other food enterprises using different platforms and systems. We do quite a lot of enterprise support. So we do, shared learning, developing resources, connecting people, lots of advocacy, things like that for the food enterprise sector in Australia. Through COVID, we ran, we did research around people's responses and how that was working. We've just released a report that we're using as advocacy to get more funding to the sector, all of that kind of thing. And we also do quite a lot of consulting and research work here around food systems change, which is all part of what we call sector development. So creating the space that's easier to thrive for this change to these distributed supply networks. There's a couple of projects on here through COVID that came out of COVID. We're part of a big collaboration of food social enterprises now working together in Victoria under one sort of collective to move food all the way from buying legitimately from farmers and supporting enterprises into food relief, etc. We're directly brokering farmers with people who might want to sell their products, buy their products, connecting them up with hubs. And we're just starting on a big new project to actually develop shared logistics services, which is a massive problem for many farmers and hubs in terms of actually accessing affordable, trucks and moving the food. So that's something that's become very clear. So we're starting to move into that space. Next slide, please. We also do quite a lot of work around regenerative agriculture research, food systems, policy, etc. So then just flipping back from Australia and covering some of the things that Nick said, who we are and how we work together is as important as what we create. So we really are, what's come out of Open Food Network really is a very vibrant global community. And we believe that building a better food system means working together in different ways. So a lot of the ways that we work, the foundations, like all of our tools and resources, are free and open source. Everything's not for profit, independent, self-determined, self-organizing. We work hard. We have aspirations to providing reasonable livelihoods for people and fairness in pay. We have a long way to go, but there's a lot of detail and interesting discussions and things that goes into, software developers are generally extremely well paid, and trying to have equity in Open Food Network in terms of what software developers get paid, what everyone else gets paid. Longer conversation I don't have time for now. Next slide, please. That's just some pictures reiterating, ultimately, we're just groups of people who sometimes get together in real life. In the old days, we used to. Is that we had a global gathering this year Over the last 3 years, we've tried to have one gathering in person every year, which has been really great for the project, developing cohesion and relationships. We weren't able to this year, but we had a 2-week gathering, probably quite similar to how the Oxford Real Farm conference has been happening. But yeah, it was really amazing to meet all of these people and spend lots of time talking to all of these people working on food systems change around the world. And just very quickly, some of the ways that we're developing this commons together. We don't have an overarching organisation that everyone else reports to. It sort of started off with the Open Food Foundation being in that position, but over the years we've really worked to take out that Australian bottleneck. So everyone's just, different organisations in different countries, and we have 3 basic structures that are how we organise, how we manage the commons together, I guess. We have a pledge that lays out our, expected codes of behaviour and, how that works and who's part of the group managing the commons. We have a pipe where we make decisions about what's happening in software development and resource expenditure.
We're at 10 minutes, Kirsten, just so you know.
Perfect. I have one more sentence. And we have the pot, which is where we all put money in, contribute money to trying to further accelerate and improve the tools and resources that we're developing. I think that's my last slide. Click the slide. Yes, look at that. 10 minutes and 10 seconds.
Perfect timing,
Thank you
Kirsten.
very much.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. There's lots of questions coming in, and it's great to see the questions coming in to the chat. Please do keep doing that. And between us, we're going to just interrupt whenever we see a question we particularly want to answer. We're going to respond to it. So just building on Kirsten's point there about the technology and how it comes together and the open source nature of it. There was a question from Alice about a point about a farm hack, which is another open source technology, another open source contribution to fixing food systems. And I just want to sort of reiterate that the reason we called this Commons Off the Land is because OFN is entirely, the word open is part of the name of what we're doing. We completely believe in open source. We are sharing infrastructure. As a question from Rebecca about shared infrastructure. We're trying to build a system that will meet the needs of everybody who is growing, producing, and distributing food in whatever way. And we're really up for sharing with other platforms. So you mentioned Big Barn. Big Barn is a proprietary software system in the UK. Open Food Network was one of the founders of the Data Food Consortium, which is trying to develop data standards so that farmers and growers can use multiple platforms and have a single data standard so that they don't have to enter their products into Big Barn and Open Food Network and so on. It is quite hard to agree that standard with proprietary software developers who want to obviously keep data. Data is power, and they want to keep that as much as possible within their systems. But we do firmly believe in sharing data and coming up with data standards that will allow interoperability between platforms. But enough from me. Let me hand over to Thomas, who is going to talk about OFN in Brazil. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, everyone. I'm Thomas, and I'm really excited to be here and share some of the Brazilian experience within the Open Food Network. Our instance and our local platform has only been online since April 2020. So last year has been a lot about getting to meet the global community, learn the tool, and train our first batch of users. But I was really impressed with what we accomplished until now. During this period, we had 22 enterprises selling around $500,000 reais, which may be not a lot compared to other instances, but it is an expressive number if we consider that it happened almost spontaneously. We had no money to invest on marketing, and now the work was basically done by 2 people on a voluntary basis. So I guess what has been really important for us to get where we are at is the right kind of support we got. So we've been sponsored by an organization called Rede, that has been active for more than 30 years with projects aimed at helping the agricultura familiar, which is how we call the small family producer in Brazil. Rede didn't actually have that much money to put in the project. The money we got has been used mostly to pay for the digital infrastructure, but they have something that money can buy, which is reputation and trust. And I'm learning this is very, very important, especially when we are talking to grassroots movements, such as the Movimento Sem Terra, which means landless workers movement in English, and other agroecology movements. So Rede's connections have been really important and really helpful when pitching for new users and other kinds of financing and support. So one thing we have been able to test since April is how flexible the OFN platform is for our context. The enterprises using OFN in Brazil are ranging from the small and medium-sized producers to that are selling directly to consumers, to producers selling their products and their neighbors' products, to buying groups, to small and medium hubs, to CSAs. So we are glad to see how these different kinds of initiatives are using the tool, not only to sell food, but also to create a network of their own and manage their activities. Another aspect I would like to point out is how the open food how open the open food network is. I think this is an open project in so many ways. It's open in a way that allows for anyone to start managing the food communities online. It's open in a way that the platform source code is open, so anybody can use it. And it's also open in the way that it welcomes people to the global community. So I was really, really surprised when we first started posting in the community forums saying that we wanted to bring OFN to Brazil, and people like Nick were responding, yeah, let's do this. How can we help you? And answering our questions, helping us with technical support and giving advices on how to manage our instance. And generally being really, really helpful and friendly and receptive. And this is something that I personally don't find in many places these days. So this is an aspect of OFN I really appreciate, and it's one of the reasons I really believe in it. And I want to put all the energy I have to make it work here and in the whole world. So this was just a brief introduction on the work we are doing here in Brazil, and I can give you hopefully more details if you want later in the breakout session.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That was fantastic and really great to hear what's happening in Brazil. For those of you who are putting questions up in the chat about what does it take to start a new instance in your country, how do you bring Open Food Network to your country? One of my roles in the global community, I work mainly in the UK. I'm based in the UK, and I help to bring new farmers and growers and community enterprises onto the Open Food Network in the UK. But one of my roles in the global team is what we call a global gardener. So when a new country wants to start using the software, I help them to get started. So if you have questions about that, please do join breakout room number 7. I think that's right, Bella, which is my breakout room, and I will be able to answer questions about starting new instances. If you want to join breakout room number 7, put a number 7 in front of your name. Thanks, Thomas. I'm now going to hand over to Hector from Guatemala.
Yeah, good morning, everyone from Guatemala. I appreciate very much the invitation. So I'm going to talk about why we brought OFN to Guatemala. Guatemala is one of 8 centers of origin of domesticated crops. However, food insecurity is a major challenge in the country. So food insecurity is concentrated in the western highlands of Guatemala, where indigenous communities have been the main victims of social, political, and economical margination. 60% of population lives in poverty, and rural areas are almost twice the poverty rate of urban areas. So Guatemala is a leader in non-traditional agricultural exports in Central America. The production of those exports has grown exponentially over the past 10 years, benefiting smallholders, farmers with more income, but higher incomes do not coincide with improvements in food availability, food access, or food utilization. The increased commercialization of agriculture and diversification into non-traditional exports crops by smallholders, farmers, has not reduced rural poverty nor eliminated food insecurity. So small farmers face various constraints in Guatemala, including poor transportation, infrastructure, and inadequate storage facilities. Small holders and subsistence agricultures, this type of production typically supply a family with only 1/3 of its income and 3 to 4 months of essential food, meaning that families have to rely on markets, purchase, and additional income resources. So significant changes in the rural communities and household of Guatemala have been taking place in recent years. These changes affect the home and family life, the towns, and the people. And indigenous peoples are shaping new models for behavior and attitude toward the indigenous peasant economy. So we see a good option, this initiative. The Open Food Network initiative will be implemented to enable new ethical short supply chains, and it is a good alternative for small farmers in Guatemala. So we have not launched our framework in Guatemala. We are finishing research about mapping producers, groups of producers by municipalities and regions. And we expect to be launching the Open Food Network Guatemala in the next 2 months. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Hector. Great to have you here with us. And for those of you who are in countries where Open Food Network is not yet deployed, it is interesting to see that Thomas was talking about HEGI, which is the organization that has hosted Open Food Network in Brazil, and separate organization in Guatemala. Quite often it is an existing NGO or an existing not-for-profit organization in a country that is then hosting the startup of Open Food Network. And then in some cases, the community that comes together around the Open Food Network then sets up a separate organization. But sometimes it's easier to use an existing organization to support the initial deployment. Okay, so coming back from Central and Southern America back to Europe, I'm going to introduce Davey from OFN Ireland.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. My name's Davey Phillip. I have, for the last 20 years, been advocating for social solidarity approaches to community resilience and community-led sustainability. OFN Ireland, the Open Food Network of Ireland, was as recent as it's just getting started. The platform was one of the themes at our annual conference, Feeding Ourselves, which is the gathering in Ireland similar to this event that we're in now, the Oxford Rural Farming Conference, that really brings together the cooperatives, the regenerative farmers, the CSAs, to look at how in our regions we feed ourselves. And the OFN was one of the themes at the March 2020 event, the week before lockdown. So we right after that, a number of farmers, co-ops, and advocates of the local economy came together to bring the platform into Ireland and to set up OFN Ireland as a cooperative. So we've just set up as a legal entity, an industrial provident society in Ireland, a cooperative. But we have the intentions of developing that into a solidarity cooperative, which we would have done, but we had no rules or model rules in Ireland to do that. But that's our intention. We think it's fitting with a user-owned platform and the principles of OFN to be a cooperative and even this multi-stakeholder solidarity co-op. So we really just launched with a webinar in September last year, and I'm currently onboarding producers and identifying hubs. If we move to the next slide. So our community farm, Clough-Jordan Community Farm, which is the host of the Feeding Ourselves conference, have recently secured national funding from a social innovation fund called Rethink Ireland to develop an open food hub in our WeCreate Enterprise Centre, which is also, like the farm, in the ecosystem of Clough-Jordan Eco-Village in rural Ireland. So it's quite a progressive community and a great central hub to promote these objectives. So this open food hub will be providing routes to market through an open market using the platform, but also is going to provide digital training and tools and mentoring to farmers, producers, co-ops, and especially other food hubs. We're starting a little community of practice with 6 other regional food hubs across Ireland to build our capacity of offering these virtual farmers markets and also onboarding and sort of peer learning. So there's 2 parts to our open food hub in Clough-Jordan. You can see that picture there. That's one end of our enterprise centre, and there's a large bay there which will become the distribution point. But that enterprise centre also has a community fab lab, so we do a lot of farm hack and thinking about how we adapt hardware and physical tools. We also have a co-working space, which is interesting in rural Ireland, and we also have now a digital studio for events. And this centre is where our face-to-face Feeding Ourselves conference is being held each year, and now we're pivoted to offer more virtual training. And I think the success of the Oxford Rural Farming Conference and pivoting into the online space, but keeping impact and being able to bring in income. So we're just getting used to, I think, paying and valuing digital content. So that's our story. We've just started. We've now got support to set up this open food hub, which will be a one-stop shop for CSAs and the OFN in Ireland. In fact, the office now in the base for OFN Ireland and for CSA Ireland will be in the food hub. And as well as being the distribution point for the market, is also the potential it's offering that support and training to the whole country. And we take a regional focus. We're really interested in shortening supply chains, but into local food webs or resource webs, not just local supply chains, which could still be fragile. So we're really interested in the solidarity economy, in community wealth building, keeping livelihoods and wealth circulating in our regions. And if you want to discuss that a bit more, I'm in workshop 4. There's still time to change your preference. I'm just delighted to be here and so excited to be part of the OFN global community now, realizing that we are practicing food sovereignty. We're not just talking about it anymore. We're really taking autonomy over not just being able to produce our own food, but to distribute our own food in regions, making our regions far more resilient and being able to cope with the shocks we're in and the shocks we're about to face over this next decade. So I think that's enough for me. I'll leave time for that. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you so much, Davey. It makes tingles go up and down my spine when you talk about us actually making this thing happen. It does feel really powerful to me that these people all around the world are coming together and sharing ideas and building these systems that the world so desperately needs. And for me, OFN Ireland is a real beacon in terms of the sociocracy that you're building, sociocratic principles that you're using to build OFN in Ireland, which is pretty much the sort of background to the Open Food Network generally. It's just that we've never really thought of it as a sociocracy, but we've grown massively over the last few months, particularly during lockdown, and realized that we do need a global governance structure, and Davey's been really helpful with the global team in helping us to work out these sociocratic principles to help our decision making and to strategize for the growth of the network. Thank you, Davey. So from Europe, we're going to zip over to the Middle East, and we're going to hear from Rafat in, oh, we've got West Africa next. Is that what's on the slides? I think in terms of running order, can we go to Rafat's slide? If Rafat, maybe Rafat doesn't have a slide. No. Okay, maybe let's stop the slideshow, and I'm going to introduce Rafat, who will be hosting Breakout Room number 5, OFN Jordan. Thanks, Rafat.
Thanks, Nick. Actually, I'm Rafat. I'm here in Jordan, and Jordan, it's in Mediterranean area, which is, you know, it have like a complication situation between, you know, like a Zoom war. The farmers here in Jordan, they are small scale farmers. It's mostly 74% of them. They just own small land, which is less than 0.1 hectare, which is not comes to 1 hectare even. The law have played the main role that the farmer, he cannot sell directly to the customer. There is a law here in Jordan that the farmer, he cannot communicate directly to the normal customer, which is the main barrier. And also we are counting from among the other countries that the food price is very high. From here, it comes the point that the food sovereignty, from here, the point comes that we need to break down the system and build a new one. And I was like founding like Open Food Network. It's like the most effective solution to open a market, not just like a small shop, you know, like what we can say it like a small platform that you own the shop. No, it's real farm market. You know what I mean? Like you can choose the best price between these and the best quality of foods between these shops in one place. So we gather all the farmers, we gather all the shoppers, we gather all the traders to the same place that they can really integrate like the market. In Jordan here, the idea, it was like emerging in 2017 when I was like going into the open source technology and finding the other people, you know, innovation, and I find like Open Food Network, it's the best. And it have a real term, which is infrastructure, that you can build in top of it a lot of, you know, great things, like how you can manage these farmers, how you can make like a crop calendar. So if I know the demand, if I know exactly the numbers of the farmers, so I can build a good crop, you know, calendar, so I know how I can manage the farming system, you know, between these farmers. And also I can know exactly how I can make an extension and needs for these farmers. So we deploy the platform, and we got into the legal thing that how we can make the farmer selling directly to the shoppers. And by the king here in Jordan, he have like an opportunity to order to change this, you know, law. So we are working on this actually till now. There is a big interesting from the farmers, you know, and also we have like a big opportunity to build it more and more. But as I told you, we cannot go further because the law, And from the other side, we have here right now strikes. Farmers, they making a lot of strikes, and we have like small fluctuation. The parliament right now, they're trying to make the law and to change it. So we wish it will be good. The farmers and the traders, they was like very happy to work with us, and also there is a lot of association, there is a lot of foundations they would like, you know, to support us. But as I told you, the point till now stuck with the law. But we are going further, and we gather a team, you know, to work on the second layer, which is like the extension and introducing the artificial intelligence inside this infrastructure, and to build our own context, because, you know, like the Arabic countries, they have their own context. Open Food Network, it's like a remarkable opportunity to build a new, really, agriculture system. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafat. And for me, hearing your story and working through your story with you, it reminds me that it's not just the food system we're changing. That you talk about the law in Jordan being against you, and you need the Open Food Network in order to bring justice, food justice to Jordan. And it reminds me that the Open Food Network, even though we're focused on food systems, that if we can bring the principles of what we're doing here to the world as a whole, then it's a step towards world change in a fundamental way, with the food system being part of that. But to actually make new laws that are human laws, or more widely world laws, earth laws, not just for humans but for non-human beings, and to use our common intelligence to rewrite our systems in lots of ways. Thank you. So the last but one presentation is from Kobe. Kobe is working with farmers in Nigeria, but let Kobe introduce herself. Thank you, Kobe.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, my name is Kobe, and I actually work in the OFN UK team as part of the support team. But interestingly enough, I'm a woman of many talents, and I also run a small farming community in northeast Nigeria. So we work with primarily women, because we work on indigenous grains or ancient grains and indigenous teas. And the idea is that we want to build communities in which are resilient, who are trading in ways that's beneficial to them in the long term, and also puts more money in their pockets at the end of the day. And the reason why I say that is because in the spirit of tech, there seems to be a rush to be the next Shopify, the next Amazon, and this spirit has taken place in Nigeria, and I know it's taken place in Ghana and Burkina Faso, etc. And what's happened is we have software similar to OFN on the surface, except the livelihoods of the farmers in these rural communities don't change. And the reason why I say that is because our economies were built to serve urban communities or export. Hence why we grow exceptional amounts of cocoa, cashew nuts, mangoes, of which we don't consume. Which means that even if you do have a platform that's created by the commons, if we don't address what's being produced and what's being traded, then we end up perpetuating the same the status quo, essentially, which is why I tend to work primarily on ancient grains or indigenous grains, ancient teas and indigenous teas. And this image is quite interesting. It's from Harvest last year, and the women stand in a row and they sing to the god of harvest with their bowls out in order to welcome favor. The idea is that it's to bring prosperity. And it's this kind of openness, having your arms open, which I think will make a huge difference to transforming trade in West Africa. So yes, I work for OFN UK, but the small community is called the Ake Collective at present. And our desire is to build an open food network in Nigeria but based on local crops, as opposed to the idea of local trade, because trade exists already without technology. And I'll use a couple of stories to explain what I mean. The next slide would be great, thank you. Yes, so I have three short stories that I'd love to explain to people. When I first started working in northeast Nigeria, I explained to them that, oh, well, you know, the way forward is to have mobile money, so a bank account connected to your mobile phone, and so you can track your transactions. And one of the farmers said to me, okay, wait here, I need to go and charge my phone. So I assumed that, okay, he's going into his house and he'll be back in a couple of moments. He went on his motorbike and rode 2 hours away to charge his mobile. And then I realized actually the infrastructure isn't in place. The farming community I work with have no power. So yes, we can have tech-enabled solutions, but who's going to use these solutions? Another thing, and well, another short story that I thought was quite interesting and illustrates the need to build infrastructure first and start with community first, or farmers first before we build any tech solutions, is the story of Mr. Amos. So Mr. Amos was the first ancient grain farmer I worked with, and he said to me that he doesn't have any issues with pests. Now everybody has issues with pests. Anybody that knows anything about sub-Saharan Africa, post-harvest loss, etc., knows that pests are a common problem. Mr. Amos was persistent, and he was convinced that he doesn't have any issues with pests. So I asked him, well, how are you doing it? Everyone else seems to be struggling. What you know, how are you navigating this issue? And he says to me that his neighbor gave him a white powder, and he pours this white powder on his grain, and so it means no pests. Now that's scary because one, if it can kill bugs, then I'm sure it can do a lot of damage to people. And so I asked him, okay, so what's the white powder? And he says to me, I don't know, I can't read. Essentially, he's been sold a pesticide, which is not it's not illegal, except you're supposed to wait about 6 months or so before you sell the grain after it's been poured onto the product or produce or whatever. Except no one's taken the time to sit down with him and explain to him kind of what the implications of this white powder is, and that's due to incentives. So the idea is that
Kobe, you had 5 minutes.
Thank you. The idea is that I'd encourage anyone to kind of look into an OFN in multiple regions or multiple areas in Africa, but then we need to think, rather than software first, which is what the tech race in food and farming in Africa is at the moment, we should look at people first. Similar to what OFN is doing in multiple instances, let's focus on the producers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kobe. And that completely sums up OFN, that it's not about the tech. The tech is a tool to serve the people and to serve the earth. Let's build systems that are going to be good for the earth and for future generations, and not necessarily the tech that is slickest. A lot of the proprietary software out there is very slick and highly marketed, but isn't necessarily going to be the long-term fix for the food systems. Aware of time, I'm going to ask Bella for the very next slide, which is a really brief, some statistics about OFN in the UK. We're not for profit, so each individual instance makes its own governance decisions. I'm really impressed with what OFN Ireland are doing in terms of their sociocratic model. We have a pretty standard not-for-profit CIC. You can see the number of producers, shopfronts and buyers. Shopfronts, there's again different countries have different pricing schedules. We ask for most of our shopfronts to pay between 0.6 and 2.4% of their turnover to us to help us cover our running costs, but we do cap that for the big people, for the people who are trading a lot of volume through the Open Food Network. We do cap those user fees. and then a lot of support. For those of you who want these slides later, let me know and you can have them. There's then links from these slides to the support page. But in terms of answering your wonderful questions that are coming in, I'm going to suggest that we go straight to breakout rooms. I'm going to suggest that we do 10 minutes in breakout rooms, and then we come back to hear briefly what's been going on in the breakout rooms, and then to answer any final questions. So I'm going to ask Bella to dump us into breakout rooms.
We just had a couple of interesting questions or points around, you know, Australia's context in terms of being traditionally very, very, very commodity export focused, and how does the local food movement sort of sit within that, and how, you know, as we've talked much over the years, how challenging it is in Australia, where you have to explain from first principles every time to make a case for why local food systems should even exist. And also just the question of, you know, that remoteness and distance, and how does that impact, like, can people run viable community food enterprises a long way away from major population centres, and just discussing how difficult that is. And the reality is they do need to have, you know, being within 2 hours of Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth is very useful. Brisbane.
Thank you, Kirsten. If anybody here is on the call and they would like to see OFN in a bit more detail, I am going to be running a session in the conference room at 4 o'clock today, UK time. So if anybody wants to come and see how it works in practice, to see what it looks like from a producer's perspective, from a shopper's perspective, please come to the conference room, which you can find on the ORFC website. Come to the ORFC conference room at 4 o'clock. You do need to put a passcode in to get in, and that passcode is ORFC 12, which is the same passcode you use to get into the session, any other session. So come to that conference room and then use passcode ORFC 12. Any other questions? We've got 5 more minutes before this thing automatically closes. Any more comments from any of the breakout rooms, or any questions from any participants? Please do just unmute and chip in.
Yes, Nick.
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, perhaps a challenge is how to secure food, healthy food for all, not only for those who can pay or afford it. Yeah.
That's a really, really good point, Hector, and it's something that's coming up across the world, particularly in the global south, but huge increase in food inequality in the UK, with a lot of people who didn't think of themselves as food insecure, who've suddenly been pushed into that by the pandemic. And many across the world, I know Kirsten's had a chat with people during this call, but across the world, Open Food Network shop fronts are being used to provide food to people who can't afford to put food on the plate. We are fundamentally interested in replacing food banks. We think food banks are not the answer. They're a sticking plaster to a problem that isn't resolving the core issue. And what a lot of food hubs in the UK are doing, some are focused entirely on food poverty and distributing surplus food, but many of them are food hubs for their local population, with people who can afford it paying full price for their local food, and in some cases paying more than full price for their local food. They're paying it forward. They're buying a veg box for a neighbor they haven't met yet. They're paying for food so that the food hub can then have a bursary fund, which can then pay, which can either make food available on a free or a subsidized basis to people who can't afford it. And people, and a lot of food hubs are having, there's one of our food hubs that's called Freezers of Love, where these ready-made meals are frozen. They're then made available on a donation basis and a free basis. So anybody can take a meal from a Freezer of Love. There's a microwave beside the freezer. They can heat it. If they're homeless, they can literally just take the meal, heat it up and eat it on the spot. And also there is an option to make a donation, but many people are taking a meal without making a donation, and a lot of people are making a donation and not taking a meal. So there are many ways that the Open Food Network is being used to address food equality. 2 more minutes. Any final questions or comments?
Yeah, I suppose I was just wondering about the digital divide issue. I lived in Australia actually for a couple of years, and I know Australia's hardly, far from being, it's very much a very overdeveloped country, but where I lived was completely off-grid, not by choice, but by design, because it was basically too expensive to run power into the area, and there was a huge divide in the area between people wanting mains and people wanting to be off mains. But anyway, so we had no mobile. Internet was by satellite and was very expensive and very unreliable, and the Telstra phone company kind of, again, it'd be days if you had any trouble with your landline, but basically pretty much off grid. So I suppose that was the first thing that came into my head when I was at this workshop. So I had to deal with these kind of issues, and even even in countries like Ireland here, we've huge broadband inequality, we're all out of broadband and things like
Could I
that.
take that, Nick? So,
Thanks.
so just I think very quickly now that with the pandemic, it's opened up opportunities. My mother now, who was so digitally unaware, is now using Zoom and WhatsApp. And with phones now, even the broadband in rural Ireland has hugely improved. And the phone companies even offering additional data because we're homeschooling and home working. So it's less of an issue, still an issue, but less of an issue now, but one we have to be aware of.
Okay, so just a final closing thank you to everyone for being here, and a massive thank you to Kirsten in particular for being here at 1:30 in the morning, and also for starting this amazing project 8-9 years ago. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you to all the panelists. It's been wonderful to hear you, and I'm really appreciating your input. And thanks for everyone for joining this call. It's been amazing to have this worldwide community and a sense of it. Bless you, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks, everybody.